Okay, let's check out these Module 2 questions. So let's start off with this first one here about Claire opening a bank account. You see here really carefully, if you see after she opens the account, she deposits the same amount of money each week. She does not withdraw any money, which is good. So basically they're asking to see like, what's this pattern going along here? And so the pattern that we're seeing going along here is to add $14 every week. So the question is though, how much did she have at the end of n weeks? Which then means I need to know what was her start. We know what happens at the end of the weeks, 214 at the end of the week, 220, and 8 at the end of the week. So if we think about this in terms of a table, right, where n is the number of weeks and this is the amount of money, so we have 1, 214, 2, 228, 3, 242. You get the idea. But remember, the number that I really need is this start number. Where are we at week 0? And so if we know we're adding 14 this whole way here, what was the number we added and got 214? You know, what was our start number here? And that had to be 200, which why is A is our better answer. This question here, they give us a table and they're asking us to go through and ask, what does the domain represent? And if you think back to our shortcut to help us remember, our Dixie-Royd, the D stands for domain, it's our input, it's our x-axis, it's our independent variable. So that means basically we are looking at this column here. So our domain is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's describing option C there, the number of weeks which Erica recorded the heights of the plants. As we look at this problem and see the graph that's given to us, and we know that the pool has 30,000 gallons of water in it, and what's happening here to go through and figure out how the pool is being drained. We could write an equation, but we could also just stop and see what types of patterns that we see going along here and try to figure out, well, as the time goes on, how long is it going to take until there is no water in that pool? And as you can see, if we look at your x and your y axis, and even sort of starting here at this very last point here, is that basically every time that my x is changing by 30 minutes, right? If we sort of see what's going on here, every time it's changing by 30 minutes, the thousands of gallons of water it's losing is basically it's losing 3,000 gallons of water. So even if we just sort of restart this table here and say, well, at 150 minutes, I know that I'm at 15,000 gallons of water, if you wanted to put the thousands in, and then just know that every time I go through now and add another 30 minutes, so 180 minutes, this guy is then going to go down by another 3,000 gallons of water. So this would be 12,000. And then continue this on. We gain another 30 minutes over here. So this becomes 210 minutes. But this guy loses 3,000. I can't put it on my page there. And continue this pattern on here and see until we get a 0 in this side. And how long does it take? And it's going to take 300 minutes. Okay, this problem is testing to see what you remember about intercept form. And so basically they just want to know which equation describes this line. So right away I start to see that the y-intercept is 3. So that eliminates B and D from my choices. And when I look at my leftovers between A and C, I can see that the only difference is the slope. So I want to now go through and look at this graph pretty carefully and see what the slope is. They are both negative, so I just need to figure out if it's negative 3/4 or negative 4/3. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick 2 pretty points here, and these guys are my pretty points there. And I see I'm going up 3, but then I go left 4. So since I remember that it's rise over run, I'm going to have a positive 3 and a negative 4 in my denominator, which is why A is my better answer. Friends, this is reading this problem. This problem is just a proportion problem. We know Dana is reading a book at 2 pages every 3 minutes. And so if Dana has a book that is 28 pages long, or a chapter that's 28 pages long, that 28 is going to go up here, and I just need to go through it and figure out what the number is along here. So I can go through it and either multiply top and bottom by 14, or I can go through and cross multiply, but my final answer there would be C at 42. This problem is great to do either on your calculator or making a table because we have some information about Marty going through and doing some exercising. And for Marty's exercising, we know, or after he's exercising, we know his heart rate is at 168 beats per minute, and it's decreasing at 4 beats per minute until it reaches his resting heart rate, which is 72. So you could go through and balance this guy. You could go through and put this guy into y equals of your equation and move the cursor down till you get to the 72. You could make a table and keep subtracting 4 until you get to the resting heart rate of 72. But a final answer there would be 24. This problem is great because you start thinking that you're going to need to use point slope form to go through and take this point and take this slope and plug it into your equation. So y equals the y number plus your slope, so negative 1/4, and then x minus 8. Remember, this is on your formula sheet, so you just have to plug everything in. And then from here, you can go through and distribute and simplify to get a final answer. So totally fine going through and solving it this way. Okay, and so you're like, I've got this, I distribute this way. Negative 1/4 times what's technically negative 8 is a positive 2. And the like terms here are the 12 and the 2. So my final answer would be y equals 14 plus a negative 1/4 x, which is then obviously d. And that really didn't take a lot of work. But you also have 4 answer choices over here, guys. You could take this point here, where the x is 8 and the y is 12, and go through and plug that in for the x and y here and see if it makes the equation work. And if you go through and you test all of these, the only one that is going to work would again be option D. This problem is really just asking you to interpret what's going on in this equation. So they give you a whole scenario, and they're telling you basically that the y is describing the satellite's altitude in kilometers X months after its altitude begins to decrease. And it's asking you which statement is true. So you really should read all 4 of them and see which ones make sense. So when I read A, that the satellite was at an altitude of 17,600 kilometers before its altitude began to decrease, that one sounded pretty good because that was my start number. So I'm hanging on to that one. When I read B, the satellite will re-enter Earth's atmosphere at 23 months, that's like giving me an answer. This 23 is not describing the number of months. X is describing the months. So it can't be B. The satellite was traveling at a rate of 17,600 kilometers per hour. Again, that 17.6 is really describing a start, and my start is in kilometers here. So it can't be this guy here either. And the last one, where the satellite has been slowing down at a rate of 23 kilometers per hour, since its altitude began to decrease. Remember, that x is actually being described in months, so it doesn't make sense to have that 23 be in hours whenever x is described in months. So A is your best answer. Okay, this problem is throwing some vocabulary at us. So when we're looking at this problem is really going through and talking about a box and whisker plot when I start seeing about quartiles. So I have some information about an 800-meter run during a track meet where I know the fastest time was 2 minutes. Now, 2 minutes on a number line is going to be lower than my 3s. So I'm going to put the 2 minutes here sort of as my low point, right? So there's my 2 minutes. I know my first quartile is 2 minutes and 15 seconds. I know my third quartile, which would be the end of my box, is 3 minutes and 5 seconds. And I know my slowest time, that high end, is going to be 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And so now I want to go through and read each of my descriptions, remembering what I know about box and whisker plots. That basically the box is representing 50% of the data, and then each whisker on either end is another 25% of my data. So when I say about half, for A, about half the times are between 2 and 240, I don't know where 240 fell in here, so I can't use 240 there, so I can't use A. About half the times are between 2 and 245. Well, here's my 2, and again, I don't have a 245 to be able to reference, and I'm not averaging, I'm not guessing. I can only use the numbers they gave me, so B doesn't make sense. C is saying about 1/4 of the times are between 215 and 330. Well, between 215 and 330, that actually would be 75% of the times, not 25% of them. And so D is looking pretty good here, and we check it. About 1/4 of the times are between 305 and 330. That is that top part of that whisker there. So D is your best answer. Okay, this problem is a mean, median, mode type of problem. So we see some information here about this group that actually has 8 members in it, and that they ran a mean distance of 33 miles. So let's just start with that. If we take these 5 numbers and we sum these all together and add these all up, we would get 150 miles. So that means if the 150 miles plus X more divided by 8 has to equal 33. So if you go through and balance and solve this, you'll actually find out that X has to equal 114. So the first thing I went through and did is go through and see my answer choices and see which ones summed to 114. And so whenever I see this, B and C both did not sum to 114. So I'm down to just A and D. Now I need to see my other information and see that the median distance was 32. And again, I have 8 people. So if I think this through and say, well, if I have 8 people, that means my median is going to be between my 4th and my 5th number. So I've got 8 numbers here, and my median is going to be basically between these 2. So if I go through and start filling in some numbers here, so if we take A and we put them in numerical order and say, well, my originals plus the answers in A, I would have a 23, there we go, 25, a 26, a 32 on this side, 37, 44, and a 45. Right there in the middle, that's my median of 32. So A is going to be my answer. But let's double check D as we go through here. And if we double check D and we use the numbers, I'm just going to write below here. But if we use the numbers in D and the originals, and we'd have a 23, a 25, a 26, a 30 here, and a 32 here. Well, right there, my median would be a 31, which does not satisfy the requirement of a 32. So that's why A is your answer. With this problem, they give us a data set with a fitted line and ask us to go, based on this line of best fit, what would be the most likely attendance? So going through and looking at this line, I take a quick gander and see if I can find some pretty points that I can try to make some estimations with. So these 2 points here are roughly showing that basically for every 5 degrees increase, I can see that there is roughly, let's call it about 60 people increase. Okay, because that other purple dot there is just slightly above it. So knowing that, if I'm at 90, and I'm going to estimate that 90 is, again, roughly about 320 people, I can then say as I move from 90 to 95, which is my goal there, my 320 is going to roughly go up by 60 people. So that's why B is my best answer at 380. Okay, this problem is a great prob and stat type of problem where statistically we're going through and seeing that we have this information about how many coupons are available to the first 800 customers. So the question is, what's the probability that the first 3 customers get a 30% off coupon? Well, for that first customer, there's 50 30% off coupons out of the 800 there. So they get a coupon. The second person that walks in is only going to have 799 coupons to choose from. And now we're assuming that the first person gets one of those 30% off, there's only 49 for them to get. And then the third person now is 1 less coupon for them to earn and 1 less coupon for them to choose from, and so on and so forth. And we only need the first 3, right? The first 3 people there. So it's going to be option D here because we go through and we multiply those results.